Hello survivors and welcome to another Walking Dead Road to Survival video. In this video we're going to be taking a first look at Steve, who is the unique S-class character that is going to be a reward for War of Champions. The top 3 factions in War of Champions receive this character straight up, as you can see, and then the lower factions will basically receive cards of him, large amount of cards if they wish to pick him up. In the milestone rewards there are boxes as well that also give his cards, so you can pick him up even if you do not come first. It takes a lot of work if you're not in the top 3. For instance, if you're all the way down in this position, you need to hit a lot of particular milestones to be able to get him. He is only going to be available in this event, and that means if you do want to get him and you are in War of Champions, you're going to have to sort of work out the sort of milestone you're going to need to hit based on the position your faction's going to finish in. However, we'll look at the character himself. Visually, he looks like a kind of beach dude because he's got the shark tooth around his neck. I do like that very small thing. There's not much else to him. He's very, very low-key in terms of what he's wearing. Just shorts and shirt and a t-shirt. Very, very low-key. He has his own unique weapon, which we will look at later on. But that shark tooth is the thing that really stuck out in terms of uniqueness. However, we'll look at his stats, and he's got 4,144 attack, 4,555 defense, and 3,538 HP. That is with 30 veteran rings. His trait is strong, and his role is damage. Now, his stats lining up with his damage role is kind of off because his attack stat is actually quite low. However, based on the rest of his kit, I'd actually say his attack stat could be a bit higher than it should have been. First, we'll look at his rush, and it is called Burning Apathy. It has got a 66 AP cost, deal 2,000 burn damage to one enemy for 4 turns. That enemy and all adjacent enemies get 20% AP reduction. That's quite a lot of control on a rush. It's very much like Zachary's, except it is adjacent in this. But the 2,000 burn damage is huge. I believe that's the highest amount of burn damage that we do have in the game. It is only single target, but because he's 66 AP with the right weapons on a defense team or an attack team, he could go off pretty quickly with a command. Now, because he doesn't have any percentage damage on this rush and is still considered a damage dealer, that's where I was talking about his attack stat maybe being a little bit higher than it needed to be. If his attack stat was, let's say, 3,200 and the HP was boosted by 700, I think the majority of people would have been happy with the situation, just because attack isn't really going to give him too much, but there could be other parts of his kit that utilize his attack stat. His basic attacks will always utilize the attack stat, but generally speaking aren't going to do a great deal of damage. His active skill is Recover Infection and bonus HP. I think this is the first infection recover, which is very useful for defensive teams, generally speaking, because defense teams want to stay alive for as long as possible, and infection hard counters timeout teams. Whereas attack teams, if they get infected, it isn't as big a deal because you generally want to win as quickly as possible. So infection isn't too much of a problem because generally it will kill you by like turn 5 or 6, and realistically you want to win a raid by that point anyway. It has an initial cooldown of 3, and number of uses 10, so it has got different cooldowns than usual. Up to 2 teammates recover from infection. Up to 3 teammates get 30% bonus HP. There's no AP gain on this at all, so Steve will lose a turn. The bonus HP on that is a nice little cherry on top, but it will be bypassed by burn and bleed. That only affects your normal health pool. So you could be at 100% bonus HP and 1 HP, and if you get a 10 bleed, you're going to be dead the next turn. Now, he does have a specialist skill, and it is Firestarter. So after he does his initial rush, he can attack that character again, and it will spread that 2,000 burn to an adjacent character, and that is 2,000 burn for 4 turns. That's a lot of damage. And we're looking at 8,000 damage. When he spreads it the next turn, the next character will take 6,000, and then he could spread it again. He can keep spreading it every single turn, and that's a lot of damage over time. Generally speaking, by the looks of things, Steve is more geared towards a defense team rather than an attack team. And attack teams can't really deal with damage over time as well as defense teams can generally. They don't have as high health pools, so 8,000 damage is huge. Most attack team characters maybe have 4,000 to 5,000 HP. You generally don't raise the HP of attacking characters. So if Steve rushes and starts going off with that fire starter, it could be absolutely devastating for an attack team. Now he has got a unique weapon, and it is called Steve's Aggressive Sharpened Pool Skimmer. So he's not a beach dude, after all. He is, I guess he's just a pool cleaner. But maybe he is a beach dude as well. I mean, I think he is. We'll look at the stats of it. It's got 30% attack, a medium bonus to AP when attacking, and when attacking, a better chance to recover from Confuse and make a second attack with 400% damage. So 3 parts of this, obviously. The 30% attack is not ideal, in my opinion. You kind of would have wanted a more defensive stat. I think as this is a unique weapon, you probably want to keep it as attack, just no point swapping it out later. If you don't like the weapon, you can make it a 5-star weapon and swap in a weapon that you do like, but generally speaking, keep the base weapon because you can get better upgrades on it. You can get more upgrades on it, so that's generally speaking the best way to go. So make it 40% attack here. The next slot would be your upgrade slot, so you would want to have huge AP on attack, and that's your weapon done as a 4-star weapon. When you get into the 5-star territory, there are different ways you can go. You know, you could go with Ransack in that case and try and steal buffs. You know, there are multiple different ways you can go on a 5-star weapon, but you would want to upgrade that attack to 50%. Now we'll look at the 3rd slot, and this one is interesting. I think it is actually really powerful, but there are obviously a downside here. You are a big window on a defense team. You're not going to be able to stop anyone from attacking you. No one's going to look at that and go, I can't attack that guy. But a lot of strong characters have stun on attack, and that's already the case pretty much, so it's not that big a deal. The better chance to recover from Confuse is interesting, but a majority of Confuse is only like 2 turns. You do get the odd 3 turns, so I don't think it is that big a deal, but it means you just wouldn't need to use Confuse Resist so much. If he gets confused, he would basically potentially recover it. It would have been better if he had a better chance to give himself focus for, like, let's say 2 turns. I think that would have been nicer to have. It would do exactly the same thing as Confuse, but it would have wider impact. For instance, he could bypass shields after that, and he also wouldn't be able to get taunted. So I think that would have been a bit of a nicer version of that. But that is the first half, and that is as it is. Now the second half is really interesting because while it doesn't look great, it's just a double attack weapon effectively. That 400% is almost a rush in a lot of other characters' cases. If you look at Angel, her rush is 400% to a line of characters. If you look at Marlon Rosie, it's 300% to one character. Now, Marlon Rosie does have a kit boost within his active skill to massively increase that, but that's actually a really good second attack character, and that's really nice because, like I said, he basically is getting off huge amounts of attack. On a defense team, that would be really good because attack teams don't have too much defensive stats, and that 400% would actually be really damaging. Against a defense team, not as much, especially if you had to gear him defensively. And this is why I think that you should probably still stick towards defensive makeup of this character and just utilize the 400% as more of a bonus than anything else. So I think Steve in the right teams could be really good. Behind a Lao Po, for instance, and then you've got characters like Dayu, you're going to be dealing out Burn, Bleed. You could potentially have no defense down on Steve as well on that 4 slot. You can make very defensive makeups with strong teams now. Especially if you run maybe like a Command in there, and maybe Heng Yen, there's more control. I think you can see some very nasty melee defense teams coming out in the future. And it does seem like they're trying to build teams around Lao Po, maybe a little bit too late because Lao Po came out so long ago. But we could see a little bit of Lao Po poking her head above the water because you cannot defense down greens if you get that special. And that's a small counter to a lot of the teams that are running around on attack right now in terms of putting defense down and then going for rampage basic attacks or rampage rushes. However, I will say that Steve is not like clear-cut going to be game-changing for anyone who gets him. He will have to be built very specifically and very well. And I think that is actually good. It will require a little bit of know-how, a little bit of ability to make him a great character. Whereas there are a lot of characters out there where it didn't really require too much brain function to actually get a character to work well. I'm talking about like the Zacharys in the past. And if we had a character like that going into War of Champions rewards, it would have massively increased the gap that is already present in the game. But I think Steve is great. It is a shame that I won't ever be able to get a hold of him because he is going to be a War of Champions unique character. So this is pretty much going to be the only ever video we're ever going to see of Steve. So thank you for being here, Steve. But see you later. Thank you very much for being here as well, guys. Thank you very much for watching my video. Do tell me what you think about Steve, though. That is the end of my video. Thank you very much for tuning in. And as always, keep on surviving, guys. Keep on surviving.